So welcome to this week's Democracy Briefing. I'm Lori Coleman. I'm a co-founder of DemCast and currently Director of Strategy. This is the first Democracy briefing that you've been on. Let me tell you just a minute about DemCast. We are a nonprofit not-for-profit organization. Our goal is to elevate messaging online and really enable the everyday social media user to use their social accounts to spread truth and also be an advocate for the changes they wish to see. Of course, we are issue-based as well as electoral. And we are very excited to be hosting our bi-weekly democracy briefings. Of course, we're getting to 99 days right now, not that anybody's counting, before Election Day. And so we're definitely thrilled to be highlighting some amazing candidates tonight and over the next 3 months. Very excited for that. As part of our program that we have named Mobilize for Midterms, we are focusing on 3 buckets of races to make sure that we keep a Democratic control of the House, making sure that we keep our Senate Democrats, as well as expand those at least +2, and I'll let y'all figure out why we need 2 more. As well as really protecting democracy, because we know that how important the governor, the AGs, and the Secretary of State races are in making sure that we still have the ability to vote in our states. So we are hitting all 3 of those buckets with tonight's guests, so we are very excited to do that. If you I'll drop the link for our midterms process in the chat in a minute here. Also, we will have time for some Q&A. We would ask that if you have a question for one of us or one of our candidates, if you'll actually put it in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. You can type in your questions there. We may type an answer, or we may be able to answer those questions as we get towards the end of the discussion. So very excited. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jamie Carter, who is our Director of Outreach and Partnerships for DemCast, and she is going to lead off the introductions.
Hi, everyone. Well, I'm so excited tonight that we get to co-host with Rachel Green. She is the CEO and founder of the Women of Color Coalition. She is fabulous. So she has just been one of my favorite people to work with. I get to work with a lot of amazing groups, but Rachel is one of my favorite. And every time I talk to her, we're on the phone for an hour because she has such fascinating things to say. So Rachel is a resident of Deptford Township, New Jersey, and she has been there for 40 years and resides there with her husband, Franklin. Rachel's honored to be the mother of 2 fabulous children, Alexandra and Alston. And for several years, she has been an architect along with her fellow school board members. She holds a bachelor's degree in business management, a postgraduate degree in Master's Public and Administration, and currently is pursuing her doctoral degree in management of organizational leadership. She has served and advocated for the educational needs, civil rights, and social justice of the children in the municipality and the community for many years. And she is the CEO and founder of the Women of Color Coalition, plus many others, which we probably don't have time to list all of her accomplishments tonight. So thank you so much, Rachel, for co-hosting this with us.
Well, it is an honor. And of course, my buddy in crime, as they say, Jamie, we're always collaborating on some wonderful, great events. And this one here tonight, I have definitely been looking forward to for a while. We have 3 fabulous individuals that are going to be speaking to us tonight, and their races are pivotal. pivotal to us holding on to the House. It is going to be so important, and they have opportunities to really upset the apple cart, as they say. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce our first fabulous guest, and then the other ladies are going to help me out here and introduce the other two fabulous ladies that are on with Tim. But as you can see, I'm a little biased, ladies. I'm a Jersey girl. You ladies are fabulous, but I got my Tim here in Jersey, so I'm a little biased. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce our guy, our congressman and future congressman in the congressional district of CD2 here in New Jersey, Tim Alexander. Tim Alexander is a retired captain detective in New Jersey and former Philadelphia assistant DA. Later, Tim left public service to represent plaintiffs in New Jersey and Pennsylvania in matters of civil rights and employment discrimination. Tim has a unique perspective on civil rights issues as a former police officer and a victim of police brutality before becoming a member of law enforcement community. In fact, after Tim was shot at and assaulted, arrested by police in a case of mistaken identity, his grandfather convinced him that in order to make change, he needed to join the force and do it from within. Today, Tim proudly reports that during his tenure as a law enforcement executive, he reworked his agency's policies and changed how it interacts with communities they serve. Now, as a candidate for Congress, Tim is continuing the same mission to make change from within. Ladies and gentlemen, our favorite guy from Jersey, Tim Alexander.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. Rachel, thank you for that wonderful introduction. This is a tremendous opportunity for myself, and I know the other candidates, I'll let them speak for themselves, to come in and to meet with everyone and to share a little bit about ourselves, our plan, and what we're going to do after November 8th, gearing up for actually being sworn into Congress and our prospective offices. So thank you all for again, and I look forward to this discussion this evening.
Thank you for that, Tim. It wouldn't be Zoom without the family deciding to call you after you've already sent everybody in the house a text saying that Mom's on a very important Zoom right now. So we need the mommies out there, give me some thumbs up and, some snaps there. You understand where I'm coming from, right? Trying to keep from having the annoyed sister face right now because everybody received the text. So with that being said, I'm going to pass the agenda back over to my sister, Jamie, who's going to introduce our next fabulous guest for this evening.
So our next fabulous guest is Chelsea Clark. She is running for one of the most important offices, and that is Secretary of State in Ohio. Chelsea is a small business owner, city councilwoman, a sixth-generation farmer, and a single mom. She's running to be Ohio's Secretary of State because our democracy is under attack, and she is the one that will fight to make sure we all have access to vote, that all votes are counted, and that our elections are safe and secure. For years, state leaders have been trying to make it harder to vote, and that's why we need a Secretary of State who will champion democracy for Ohio and the rest of the country. So thank you so much, Chelsea, for being here, because this is one of the toughest races. I mean, you get violent death threats running for these offices these days.
Yeah, you do. Well, hey, y'all, thank you for having me. And thank you so much for, just being inclusive in terms of highlighting and looking at the magnitude of these races, because a lot of times when you're candidates that look that have this amazing, bronze finish, a lot of times we don't get those platforms, and we certainly deserve them, and our democracy does as well. So I'm born and bred an Ohioan, come out of the country, a small place called Allen County in Ohio. And what I do know and what I do see is I see a government that's increasingly polarizing and doing everything in its power to break the good people, not just of Ohio, but of this nation that we've built. And so I'm extraordinarily, as my granny would say, pitched off about it, and know that I've got certain skill sets that lend themselves very well to this type of work. In Ohio specifically, because different secretaries of states in different states, of course, have different charges. Here, ours is initially one chief elections officer certifying the elections, also sitting on the redistricting commission, which we'll, I'm sure, undoubtedly talk about and why that's so critical. And then thirdly, in terms of broader agendas and broad work, is the gateway for business registration and filing in the state of Ohio. So thank you all so much for having me. Thank you, Rachel, for the work that you've done, and the rest of you ladies for putting this together. And I'm excited to get in.
Right. And next, Lori, if you wouldn't mind introducing our next fabulous guest. You're on mute, my sister. Again, wouldn't be Zoom if we didn't do that once tonight as well, correct?
Yes. All right. It is my pleasure to introduce Representative Krystle Matthews, who is running again in South Carolina against Tim Scott. Krystle is a single mom of 5 children, ranging in age between 8 and 18. So we know she can multitask. She's been forging her own path her entire life. She has served the communities of Ladstone, North Charleston, and Goose Creek as a state house representative in District 117 for the past 3 years, while working full-time at Boeing as an engineering planner. She ran for her first office in 2018, not knowing anyone in politics on either side, but she knew she wanted to represent working folks who may not have been groomed or versed in politics, but were frustrated with the current political climate. Representative Matthews believes that young adults, minorities, women, and working families are the backbone of South Carolina. She was inspired to run for office because she believes people who look like her and come from backgrounds like hers are almost often affected by the most, but heard from the least. And she's been a champion for women, girls, veterans issues, economic development, and infrastructure. And so we are very excited to have Krystle on today. So go ahead and unmute yourself and say hi.
Thank you so much, Lori. I echo the sentiments of my brother and sister that came before me. I am just so honored to be able to have a platform where we can have an open discussion and really elevate our messages. I am actually from Ohio, Chelsea, Sandusky, Ohio, born and raised. I've been in South Carolina 15 years. My call time manager is actually from New Jersey. So I feel like I'm right at home. The word coalition being on the screen couldn't be more appropriate for what we are going to do when we get into office, for each other, with each other, to help the communities really strive and grow together. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's get to it, everyone. Let's get right into the questions. We're ready. I know our attendees are ready, so I'm looking forward to this great dialogue this evening. First, we're going to start off with our first question for our fabulous candidates tonight. Can you tell us a bit about your background prior to politics and why you decided to run for office? And we're going to start with the fabulous ladies tonight first. So let's start with Chelsea.
Gonna do it all night, apparently. Thank you. So I'm a city
I'm gonna try to
councilwoman.
switch it up. I'll try not to make you do it first all the time.
No, it's okay. I just have to remember to unmute myself. That would be ideal.
We're all friends here. We're all amongst family. It's all good.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. So the question was why we got into politics, or the background. Did you say? Okay. So my background, I like I said, sixth generation farmer out of Allen County. Upon graduation, I moved here to the city of Cincinnati, actually the outskirts of Cincinnati, and wanted to get involved in my community. I started in PTA and doing a lot of work for the schools and as a financial analyst. And things I was increasingly seeing things that bothered me and were disturbing. I said, well, you know what? My background and my bachelor's was in business and political science, and so therefore, I think we've got an opportunity now to make some greater changes. And so, ran for city council, was successful, and have been really excited about working in the advancement of our city. So I started our city's first minority business initiative as a minority businesswoman, both female and Black. I am very, very much intimately involved with the lack of access and capital that our businesses get. And it's not because the lack of hard work ethic and tears and blood, sweat, and all that are not put into the equation, but it is quite simply a system that exists that makes it very difficult. And so making sure that we've got enough tools and education and resources to reach out to those communities to support them on economic development matters as well is really important to me. So those things really just kind of paved the way for this greater work. And after a 2020 election, and we all saw historic numbers across the United States, to see what we saw in Ohio, over 5.9 million people exercise their right, stay in long lines, lose wages. Some of them were the first time they had ever voted in their late in life in their 80s and 90s. Sometimes some of them were their first their first votes cast, and they were still young folks. But we had every single walk of life that said, hey, I'm really, really concerned and disgruntled with the trajectory of this country, and I want my voice counted. And what we got in response to that was not, hey, you've done your civic thing, you've done your duty. That's not what we got. What we got instead was over 400 pieces of legislation that was thrown across the United States in voter suppression tactics. So what that tells us is that we don't necessarily want your engagement. We only want your engagement if you're going to be probably for a certain team. And that is certainly problematic. And one of the reasons that I said, we've got a lot of work to do, and it's time to take, my advocacy skills and business acumen and take it to another level.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And Krystle, same question. Can you tell us a bit about your background prior to politics and why you decided to run for office?
Yes, so I am originally from Ohio, as you heard me say. I am a child of two parents who have been to prison, a child of domestic violence. So I am quintessentially that person that everybody talks about they're trying to save. So what I have done with my life is I've just tried my best to survive and live it. I'm probably one of very few candidates that does not have a college degree. I did go to college, but I did not finish, and I couldn't afford to finish. And so I dropped out, and I never thought I would get to be able to do the things that I really sought to do, like being an engineer and things like that. But I proved that being a hard worker and being smart, because I knew my capabilities, would still launch me into where I was going. And so in 2017, I had just went through a divorce. I was kind of depressed. I had some anxiety. I have my 5 kids, of course, and I'm working and I'm living every day. And I'm watching things happen around me and I'm frustrated. Well, I read an article one night that was about midterm elections and why they're important. And it blew my mind that as much as I think I'm smart and intelligent, I did not understand the connection between politics and my everyday life. It's not that I didn't care. I just simply didn't know. And I didn't travel in political circles. So you wouldn't catch me. I mean, I was, breakfast, dropping people off to school, Gatorade for sports after, homework, dinner, bed, do it next morning, like so many other people. And I decided to run for that office, not knowing anybody and not knowing how to campaign. And I had one guy from Virginia reach out that was trying to sell his services. And when he found out I didn't have any help, decided to help me. I raised $720 whopping, right? And I flipped the seat from an 8-year Republican incumbent who held it simply by getting out and talking to the people. People are so tired of placing blame. They really just want solutions. And so the reason why I got into it is I wanted to inspire others. I wanted to inspire especially single mothers. I think there's a stigma that comes with being a single mother that it's very unspoken, but we are so powerful, and our experience has prepared us for so many things. And I just want to get out there and make sure that young women, single mothers, that we understand that we are still powerful. Our voices are still very much needed. And it's not up to other people to decide what our capabilities are, but for us to decide. So that's why I'm running, because I want to make sure that we have a voice that is unafraid to be emotional, something they call women all the time, to be young and not crazy, but be young and have a vision for the future. I want to make sure that our representation is mature and sturdy and respected, and not what people wanted to throw it around and make it seem like. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that. Woo! Friends, are we getting excited? I'm telling you, these candidates are fabulous. Now remember, their information's in the chat. We have a donation link. Look, $670, my sister, you go. But we all know they need some money, y'all. They're going to need support. They need your donations. They're going to need your dollars to be able to make sure they have folks on the ground to get their message out. Next, we have Tim Alexander. Tim, the same question, please.
Sure. So I'm, where do I start? So I started, as you heard in my background, was a law enforcement. I don't think what was covered was that I started in the police academy 6 months out of high school. It was a option for saving money to go to college. And then once I got into the academy and started liking what I was learning, unfortunately, I didn't make it through my first time. And that's when I was out. My father passed away, and I was trying to take care of his funeral arrangements while sitting in the car, literally just left the funeral home, sitting in my car, plotting my next step, when these officers approached my car and without conversation, opened fire. I thought I was being carjacked. I got out, and of course they assaulted me, and then they ended up charging me. And then later to find out that they thought I was someone else. So, which I don't know what that person done in their life that warrant automatic shooting, but nevertheless, as you heard Rachel tell everybody that, it took some convincing to get me back into law enforcement, but I did. And, as I went through my career and I elevated in rank, it came a time where one of my bosses said, hey, look, you got to have a degree if you're going to go further. So I decided to go to college. I got a bachelor's degree in business management. Seems like that's the theme here. And then, of course, being who I am, thought that, at my age at the time, I started college, I was 36. So when I graduated, I was in my 40s. And so I said, well, I better get an MBA because nobody's going to care about my bachelor's degree at my age. So I got an MBA. At that point, it was 2008, the markets crashed and no one cared about anything because no one was hiring. So I took that opportunity and got a law degree, all while working, all while raising, with the help of my wife, raising our 3 kids. And that's just how I am. I progress. I am too a product of a single parent. Although my father was alive, he was not involved in my life since I was 7 years old. And my mom did a great job. She did a fabulous job. She raised us, 3 of our 4 kids, at times working 3 jobs because my dad just wouldn't do the right thing. And even when he passed away, he wasn't in a position that, made it easy for us to make his arrangements. Nevertheless, everything I've experienced is a learning experience all through my life. And one of the things I'm most proudest of is being able to change policy in my agency. I did retire as a captain. I was pretty young because I started in law enforcement at 18. So my wife decided that I was too young to retire because she still had to work. So I left the law enforcement job on a Friday and started as assistant district attorney on Monday. And that was my retirement weekend. Nevertheless, when I love being a police officer, my oldest daughter decided to follow my footsteps, and she too became a police officer. And at one point, one of the last jobs my mom had before she retired was a correction officer. So we have law enforcement in our family, and throughout the years, starting with myself being keenly aware of law enforcement abuses, and then seeing it go and just seems to just nonstop throughout the decades. And then the summer of 20 was just insane. So watching Derek Chauvin murder George Floyd for all the world to see was just too much for me. I decided that I need to process a little bit better. So I started writing about it. I started writing police training reform. I actually did a TED Talk, TEDx on the platform, did a talk about it. And it still wasn't getting at what I wanted to get at. I wasn't answering that call. And it became clear that in order for me to again affect change, I had to get inside to do it. And that's why I decided to run. And then of course, that's an important issue to me in correcting what I perceive as a pervasive problem that has followed law enforcement since its inception. And I believe that it's also a fixable problem. But I knew it wasn't the only issue facing us. So I started doing some work on our numbers in our district and realized that New Jersey sends more money to the federal government than any other state in the union. We are dead last on the amount of money that we get back. So with that, I start realizing that we really don't have representation for decades. We've had Republican congressmen in a blue state. And so if you think about it, we have 12 districts. We've always had a Republican congressman, with one exception. The guy we have now, he was actually elected as a Democrat. Unfortunately, and most infamously, he sat in the White House with President Trump and he shook his hand and said, "I pledge my undying loyalty to you," and switched parties. And he went from being a Democrat to being a far right Trumpian Republican. And that set me on a path of 1, we need representation. 2, we need to get some of our money back that we send to the federal government. The bipartisan infrastructure package is a great opportunity for us to do that. $1.2, $1.3 trillion of money that we could bring to our district. And instead, our congressman has done nothing to bring that money home. Even today, facing a challenge to his office, I believe a very serious challenge, he still isn't advocating and fighting to bring money home. So if he continues on this path, we will continue to go down further and further with decaying roads and bridges, airports. Our airport hasn't been expanded since it's been built. Ports needing dredging, so much work to be done, money available. So that's why I'm in this race. I want to bring that money home. I don't want to see an increase in taxes because the money is there and we already are overtaxed and we pay enough. And there's so many ideas and plans that we can do. I always say that I don't ever tout myself as the smartest person in the room, but if I can figure this stuff out, why can't they? And I believe it's just a lack of will and it's a lack of vision. So there's a lot of things we could do nationally to help our country. Again, my whole plan, all my plans, none of them involve raising taxes. The money's already there, or there's a resource for us to go get it without increasing people's tax. So that's why I'm running. That's my background. And again, I'm available for questions anybody has about anything I presented so far.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you. Next, Jamie, if you wouldn't mind giving our second question to our fabulous guest this evening. You muted, Jamie. You want me to take it for you?
I have too many tabs open now on my computer.
There you go.
So, so now let's kind of talk about a little bit about what your districts are like. And one thing I've certainly noticed is no matter where we are, if we're in red state, Utah, purple Ohio, blue New Jersey, seems to be a lot of issues that everyone cares about. So let's kind of talk a little bit about issues that matter most in, your districts. And so why don't we start off with Representative Matthews this time?
Okay, so I don't have a district. My race is statewide, so everybody in the entire state can vote in my race. The issues that we're facing here in South Carolina is education crisis, infrastructure, healthcare, and access to environmental justice. Those things have been put on the back burner so much. And as many of you may or may not know, here in South Carolina, Republicans have had a trifecta. They've had the governor's mansion, the Senate, and the House since 2012. And we have neglected to eat dinner before dessert for so long that now we have a tummy ache. We have chosen dessert before we've handled our priorities, to the point where now everything is on fire. And we have to deal with those issues one by one, a little at a time, because it will take a complete overhaul to deal with them right now. So those are the issues facing us here in South Carolina that we need to definitely take care of very quickly.
Wonderful. Chelsea, do you mind taking that question as well?
Of course not. Thank you. So similarly, we have, I'm a statewide candidate, and I do want to remark, when it comes to statewide candidates, especially specifically for Black candidates, we are seeing severe underrepresentation. So we've got currently in terms of right now, we've got 346 seats, okay, 346 statewide seats. That's your AG, your Secretary of State, Treasurer, all across the nation. I want you to think about what percentage of that, or how many of those individuals are African Americans. So you got your number in your head, 18. There are 18 of us. And so when you look at those numbers, and that's only 5%, and we know obviously that we make almost triple, almost 3 times as that in terms of our demographic. When you look at that, that's one of the reasons you're seeing such lack. That's one of the reasons you're seeing issues in healthcare, issues in educational access, et cetera, is because we do not, especially in Ohio, have a government that is inclusive and representative of so many different people. Ms. Matthews, or Rep. Matthews, talked about, just being a mother, just the fact that I'm a single Black mother, that alone, those are 3 barriers to entry right there. Just in terms of even being a politician or, working in the state house, because it is so prohibitive because of all the demands that it requires. And so what we end up seeing is this extreme lack of services. We are seeing, and honestly, a lack of compassion for people and what they're going through. I have a full-time business. I'm a city councilwoman, and I'm obviously a full-time mom to a 16 and a 13-year-old, and that requires a lot of work. And it is very difficult. As city council, I make under $500 a month. Yeah, this is not a huge city council. And so when you are, you're working to make ends meet, exactly, how much those decision makers are really transforming your life, whether they're helping you to set it up so that your kids can go to college or not. What's interesting about Ohio is we've been suffering because we've got a lot of loss when it comes to our manufacturing. A lot of industries have left Ohio, and we're kind of like the Rust Belt, right? So we've got ag is our number one, our number one industry, but we've not positioned it so that we can pass the baton to our younger kids, whether those are rural kids or urban kids, and we're still not seeing those numbers. So a lot of my work is making sure that we see that representation. What's interesting about Ohio as well is what's something called a redistricting. So post the decennial census, so every 10 years we do a census. So we got to count everybody up and figure out who's going to represent them. Well, there's this thing called gerrymandering, and the gerrymandering, slants things to where if you have a concentration of individuals that, let's say they're Black and they think along the same political lines or ideologies, you can cut those districts up and dilute their voice if you mix it up with a whole bunch of other folks from maybe very, very rural places. The same is true with a bunch of, some rural places. What that does is it really creates a very, very unfair and inefficient, quite frankly, process by which people are governing and making laws and decisions for us. that actually are not helping us. And as Mr. Alexander mentioned, we are seeing, extreme mismanagement of funds and the dollars. So the redistricting commission that is supposed to be bipartisan, we've got 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats, so that makes it bipartisan. And what happened is following the census, Republicans voted on maps that were violation of the 2015 and 18 Ohio Constitution, which demanded fair representation and competitive districts. That they didn't fail, and those maps did not fail by just one time. We're talking 5 times. 5 times the Ohio Supreme Court struck down those maps as unconstitutional, and then went on to the congressional and did it as well. So that is why we have a supermajority in Ohio for over 20 years. And what it's doing to the health of our state is drastic, and it's making it much harder for people to just live their basic lives and be able to afford a decent and dignified life here in Ohio. And I'm talking about the redistricting commission because the Secretary of State sits on the redistricting commission. So it's extremely important that I sit on that commission, because we have to have fair maps. If you can't even have a fair map, you sure as hell can't even, you don't have equal access to, or you don't, not only does it hurt in access to the polls, but your vote is simply not counted.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Tim?
Sure. So I echo with my fellow panelists, many of the points they made, but I think the most serious issue for me is our democracy is under attack. Our democracy is under attack like none other in our history. And, where do you start? Women's access to healthcare, women's access to body autonomy, our access to the polls, as our future Secretary of State was saying. This is a remarkable time that we're living in, and we're witnessing an out attack. One of the things, one of my biggest problems with our current congressman in this district is that he doesn't represent us in the sense of working for us, but he also doesn't represent us in the way he represents South Jersey, as if we are all of this mindset that Trump is the all be all, and that anything brown coming over a southern border has to be a terrorist or a rapist or whatever the other bigoted things that Trump said and our current congressman identifies with, and in fact has introduced legislation to try to solidify his position on like I was once calling it a dog whistle, but now I think it's just out and out, screaming bigotry regarding brown people fleeing war, fleeing crime, coming through the system legally, mind you, and yet still being villainized by Van Drew and company. So that's just a sample. What they're doing with the women in our country. Another strong example of how we're under attack. The fact that we cannot go to a grocery store, we cannot sit in a church, we cannot send our children to school without being the threat of being blown away by some lunatic, typically racist, crazed, whatever you want to call them, person, because they have access to assault weapons. In New Jersey, we outlawed those weapons, military-style weapons, years ago. And in New Jersey today, those laws are under attack. And part of that is, or leading that charge is our current member. So folks, if you're not motivated by nothing else, just do a little bit of research and see how each and everything we hold dear, our values in this country, the things that make us who we are. And I'll stand by this. I think this is the greatest country on earth, and I love my country, not because of our terrible history in our past. That, by the way, is yet another issue where democracy is under attack, where the Republicans are trying to tell people or school districts what they can and cannot teach in their schools. And when they're failing at it, they're pushing in some jurisdictions to allow people without even degrees to come into the school and actually teach us and educate our children, because they want to make sure to get their way. That being said, And the fact that as I was saying, how much I love this country, it's not because of the history, it's because of who we can be. We are aspirational every day. The Constitution is aspirational. It's what we're striving for. And so I firmly believe we can do this, but we can't do it unless, and I'm going to echo my colleague on the panel here, we have to get involved. We have to engage, and we have to identify the problem, present the solutions, roll up our sleeves, dig in and fight. So those are the things that we're facing. That's why I'm in this race. This is our time right now. We're not reading about this in the history books. We're living it. And someday our grandkids, at least my grandkids, should I ever have any, will be reading about this. And they're going to ask me, I hope I'm around for them to ask me, Granddad, what was it like? And I could tell them it was remarkable that we were doing this because it feels like we're doing it again. As Yogi Berra said, it's deja vu all over again, where it is, we go through these phases where people want to attack and bring us back, the old make America great again, and bring us back to a time where people like me can't be in the position that I'm in, can't be in the position I'm seeking. And that to me is very discouraging. So that's why I'm fighting. And that's what I think our biggest issue right now is the attack on our democracy.
All right. Thank you for that. Thank you, all three of you, for your comments. Our next question, and we're going to go to Mr. Alexander because I think you set us up for this next question nicely. Who is your Republican challenger and why are they a bad fit for you?
Well, I'm going to roll back the tape, but the reality here is my challenger's name is Jeff Andrew. And as I indicated, he most infamously pledged his undying loyalty to Donald Trump because he, as a Democrat, when we sent him to Congress as a Democrat, did not want to vote to impeach. So notwithstanding the fact that hours before he made this famous speech in the White House with the president, he was still taking donations from Democrats, still making promises that he wasn't going to switch parties. And then he did it, and without shame. And he refused to return people's money, and he kept the money as a Republican. And I believe that because of the COVID restrictions in 2020, he was able to maintain that seat because Democrats were concerned about people's health. And so we weren't going out in the field as much as we should have. And Republicans just didn't care, and they were doing all those things. So that being said, he is, to me, a despicable person, not because of anything in his personal character. I don't know him personally, but I could tell you what he's done in Washington and what he's doing as our representative gives him that title of being despicable, because that's not who we are. That's not who America is, and it's sure to hell not who South Jersey is. So for that reason, I'm going to go toe to toe as hard as I can with this man to get him out of office and hopefully just make him a fading memory as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Chelsea, same question. Who is your Republican challenger and why are they a bad fit for your district?
Well, so Secretary of State is the one that certifies the election. My opponent is Frank LaRose. He is the Republican incumbent. In 2018, he ran as a moderate. He was a state rep that completely, he had some things that he voted against for our unions and our brothers and sisters in labor. And then he decided to take his antics to a little step further. So in 2018, he won with only 50.9% of the vote, and that was running as a Republican moderate. I'm going to be reach across aisle. I'm going to be bipartisan, Eagle Scout, things like this. And he's a veteran, which got a family full of veterans, and it's quite shameful because the challenge that he doesn't understand is that he was able to exercise a physical type of courage, but this job requires a moral courage, one that he does not have. And he is now endorsed by Trump. So it's laughable to even think like that. The Secretary of State, the chief elections officer, the person that certifies the election, getting endorsed by the #1 chief elections denier in the entire country. That it shouldn't even be possible. And one of the words or one of the phrases that they used when they were making sure that they endorsed him was, you know what, you delivered us more votes in 18. You've delivered more votes for us than anyone else, and we appreciate it. And so our democracy absolutely is under attack. And what we're seeing is a Secretary of State that could not even stand up for 74.89% of Ohioans back in 18 when we, passed the Constitution to reform redistricting. 75% of us, nearly both Republican and Democrats and independents, said we want redistricting reform. We want to stop gerrymandering, and he refused to even vote for maps that were in line with that Constitution, and violated the Constitution repeatedly. In 2019, almost 400,000 people were up for voter purging, which means that they'll remove you from the rolls. So normal voter purges is something that has to be done to maintain the rolls if you've moved or if you've passed away, right? But in this situation, he had over 400,000. And when an independent entity came in to check and verify to see who these folks were, and if they were in fact eligible for to be purged, found that tens of thousands of them were not. And what was happening was they were targeting communities of color. They were targeting Democrats to Republicans 2-1, and they were also targeting young folks, so 26 to about 34 years of age. You think about why, right? Because most likely those are not going to be your average voter or more red voters in the state of Ohio. He continues to flood our state with misinformation. Just this summer on the Secretary of State's website, he had 2 dates. He had one as the August 2nd and then one as August 3rd for the special election. So we have a rare special election tomorrow because of what happened with redistricting, because it was unsuccessful and they would not follow the Constitution. So it pushed us into this rare election that people by and large don't even know about. It's costing us over $20 million, and taxpayers, we're footing the bill for this. And this is because of a Secretary of State that has looked past his office. He's only in it for the ambition now to run for Senate in 24, and has completely left Ohioans behind. And that's a serious, serious problem when you have people like that at the helm controlling such a vital and the foundational element of our democracy. And that is absolutely why this man cannot remain in this office, because he will follow by whatever the golden man in Mar-a-Lago on his golden toilet's going to tell him to do versus the will of Ohioans. And what our job has to be is it has to be about the people. I am from the people and for the people. And if we don't get back to that, democracy as we know it is going to end.
Thank you for that. Representative Matthews, same question.
So my opponent is Timothy Eugene Scott, notably probably the top Black Republican here in South Carolina. One of the things that I like to say about him is he hides in the shadows. Nobody actually really knows who he is. He has chosen racial distancing as a means of transportation into his political platform. And the problem with that is that it gives the facade of diversity when there really is no diversity. He has taken the viewpoint to the point where it's like, I want to make sure that I'm different from those Blacks by carrying some kind of elitism in his mannerisms and his behaviors that causes him to distance himself from us in order to gain something politically from those that support him. Now, the problem with that is he doesn't talk to communities of color that look like him. So a lot of times when we talk about statewide African-American or brown candidates, if you will, the concern is, well, they will represent those that look like them, but not necessarily us. And in his case, he has gone out of his way to make sure to tell them, I won't carry water for them. I'll carry water for you and let them get dehydrated in the meanwhile. And the problem with that is that 30% of this state is African-American. There are very much a lot of us that need things. When we talk about us, I'm not just an African American. I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I'm a worker, I'm all of these things. And the fact that he uses his color as a pity tool. You know, he sent out a 5-page letter recently with a dollar bill enclosed in it. And on the first 2 pages, he talks about, oh, I'm used to being called names and I'm used to being called Uncle Tom. And are you really asking us for sympathy while asking for money as well? When you don't visit your own communities, he went to one of the poorest, roughest high schools here, Saul High School, and he doesn't give anything back to his school. He doesn't try to improve the culture, doesn't try to improve the materials. He doesn't come and talk to the parents and the people in the community. If you are a statewide candidate, you represent the entire state. He voted against his own bill for the Policing Act and just tried to say, oh, well, you know, it was something wrong with it. And that's the thing that he does every single time. The problem with that is that nothing is getting done. None of the things that we needed coming out of the pandemic, he voted no for all of those. He most recently voted against the PACT Act. He voted against everything. He voted against Ketanji Jackson Brown, sorry. But he endorsed Herschel Walker. Yeah, I can't make this stuff up. Herschel Walker can't string together a sentence, but you're endorsing him as qualified, but you said you wouldn't vote yes for Ketanji to confirm her because she was just Black. No, she wasn't just Black. She was overly qualified as well. And so when I look at him, we have 2 senators that represent our state, Tim Scott and Lindsey Graham. They are both single men with no families, no children, not married, wealthy, and older. They represent the same diversity of people. Who represents people like me? Who represents the rest of us? Who represents what the rest of us need when we have emergency situations and we can't afford to get our cars fixed, when we can't afford to miss work? We need somebody who understands the balance that comes with running a state and making decisions for the whole and not the part. When you have schools shutting down, but we don't have protection for workers that have to be home with their children, when we have state of emergencies being lifted and not understanding that those state of emergencies come with things that benefit working families, and when you take it away, there are protections that are lost. When we talk about balance, it's not just being economically heavy as a state, which South Carolina is, which is great. It's great that we can make money, but if we can't make money and take care of our people, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. Because once people figure out that they can live with less than, you're not going to get them to go back to work and be talked crazy to and treated badly. It's not going to happen. But we haven't figured that out because why? Our leadership is so busy riding the party line that they can't actually make decisions for the people. And that's why I keep telling people, you have to choose folks that understand purpose over popularity. Because you can be pitiful or you can be powerful, but you can never be both. That is something that I am making sure that he's going to have to deal with this election. I am pulling him out of the shadows. I know exactly who I am. I don't bite my tongue. I don't back down. I say it how I feel it. You are going to know exactly where you stand with me. And so when I get a chance to debate him, I am going to make sure that we are standing firm on the issues and talking about them in depth. Because what he's been allowed to do so far is hide in the shadows of the Republican Party, right? Nobody's really asked him any real questions. His first term, he was appointed by Nikki Haley. He didn't run. He ran for re-election and he has millions in the bank, but he's sending out letters, y'all, begging people for $50 so he can do the Charleston media market. He's got over $20 million in his treasure chest. and he is begging, using a pity letter. We have to stop saying we want real representation and then not getting behind real candidates.
Right. All right.
It's time out for the partisan bickering because the needs of the people are not being met.
Mhm.
It's enough time for that in the media, but when we're talking about real life issues and the real needs of the people here in South Carolina, Tim Scott does not have our best interest at heart. He's spending all of his time traveling around the country, raising money for his probably future presidential run, when we're drowning here at home with not having clean water everywhere, people having to travel over an hour just to get to a hospital. The rural communities have been closing hospitals, y'all. People have to travel over an hour. In an emergency, 5 minutes is a long time, let alone an hour. And you talk about, thank God we don't only get what our 2 senators vote for, because if that's the case, South Carolina, we wouldn't have anything. So I'll leave it at that, but I could continue to go on about what he's not done for us. But there's too many things to list because he's so busy being a shadow for the GOP that he no longer has an identity. And I want people to stop saying he doesn't know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing, but he's so power hungry that he can't get out of our way so that we can make progress and grow as a state. Thank you.
Thank you. Woo! Come on, y'all. I saw the hearts. I saw the thumbs up. Boy, these candidates, I'm loving them. I hope you are. I know you are because I see the thumbs ups. I see the hearts coming through. I see the donations being made. Look, we got to get these individuals elected to office. With that being said, we're going to watch our time. We're not going to ask our last question. What we want to do is at least give the audience a chance, our attendees, to ask a question or two. So Jamie, Lori, how do we want to handle this? We want to do ask them to raise their hand, or would you like to read it from the chat?
Well, we've got quite a few in here.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I think this is a good one. What's the connection between politics and everyday life? I think that is a good one to kind of end on, to bring it home of why this election is so important and why we need to vote.
All right. We're going to go to Mr. Alexander first.
Sure. So the question is, what is the connection between politics and everyday life? And let me just say first, I believe that a lot of people in public office kind of loses that sense of connecting politics to everyday life. First of all, politics is only the process of getting into office. Once you're in office, it's service. So when you look at connection, and I'll use myself as an example, there isn't a single thing that people can point to in their family that my family hasn't experienced, whether it comes to police brutality or, my wife and I were married very, very young, and we started a family very young. So we know what it's like to live from paycheck to paycheck. We know what it's like to struggle to pay your bills and to make sure you have food on the table, auto insurance. You want to get gifts for your kids at Christmas time. We know what it's like. My daughter, who I told you was a police officer, unfortunately, she had to step down from her position because she contracted a virus before COVID was out there that attacked her heart. So, my 33-year-old child, when this happened, had to have a heart transplant, and we didn't know how it was going to be paid for because she couldn't afford to keep her insurance going. So she was on Medicaid, and Medicaid initially, or the hospital didn't think they were going to cover it. So, we know what that struggle is like, sitting up to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, figuring all the stuff we were going to have to sell to make sure that our daughter doesn't get strapped with $1 million+ bill for a heart transplant that she needed to save her life. Folks, if you could point to anything that's going on in most people's lives, we've been there, we've done that. And I think that provides us with empathy, that provides us with a sense of sympathy when you hear these stories. And unfortunately, because of big money, at least in the federal races, a lot of people who are in these races and actually succeed are independently wealthy because they don't need to rely, at least at their first election or so, on fundraising. And therefore we get saddled with more rich people in Congress than we have everyday, ordinary people. And so I believe that that empathy and that sympathy gets lost. And then we end up with people who, like Tim Scott, I'll use him as a perfect example, who loses connection to the realities because once or twice in his life, he was called a hard in. And reality is, if you're not being called it every single day, then, you know, you're not really there. That's all I can say about that. And I'm keeping it PG, y'all, because I really, when I think about him, and I was listening to my fellow panelists go on, I was fired up. So the reality, though, is we have to make sure that we remember our roots, we remember our people, we remember why we're doing this. In politics, only while running for office, once the election's over, it's service. That's the connection to people.
Thank you for that, Mr. Alexander. Next, Chelsea, if you wouldn't mind.
I love that. You know, there's so many different reasons that we as candidates don't mind being sacrificial, because so much of everything that we do is a sacrifice. You know, my daughter's at volleyball practice right now. She really wanted to be she's at a volleyball tryout. She really wanted me to watch, and mommy had to do this. You know, so I loved how you put, Mr. Alexander, how you put it's politics and then it's service. You really have to love what you're doing. You have to want to make sure that people have the promise that America made to us. You have to deliver on that. But if you don't force people and make them accountable and challenge a system, there's not going to be any allegiance to it, and they are not going to make sure that it's for everyone. In 1964, my dad was 17 years old, and he was marching in Birmingham, Alabama. He was jailed, and they couldn't wait to put, his daddy calls it a federal, but he got a felony. When he moved up north to Ohio, the only place I would give him a job was Ford. And he, you know, what that union did for my family, I mean, literally took us from shit to sugar, or at least his family, you know, and really, you know, what that did for solidifying us in the middle class so that we could have, you know, I could have these things when I wanted them for school, or I could go on these trips with my friends because it was part of Spanish Club. Those things are extremely, extremely meaningful. And we're watching actually a small group of people. They're small, they have a big voice, but they're a small group of people that are single-handedly making sure every rock is overturned in order to dismantle these things that have been afforded to us, you know, through some really, really hard work. And we have to realize that we've made some gains, surely, but those gains can very, very quickly be removed and be turned back. And that is what we're seeing with Roe falling, with, I mean, unions being under attack as well. The entire thing is under attack. And this is not about party politics. When you get in this work and you're a servant leader, you know, it's okay that you work for a little money, because what you're trying to do is to empower a people, to get a people engaged so that they can actually be part of a system that is supposed to deliver for them. And that is not what we're seeing. It's frustrating. And so many of us are just so tired of seeing the same old thing over and over, and and we're really forced to get involved. And so what you have here are a group of people that are absolutely hell-bent on making sure that this government is working for the people that it affects. It affects us on an everyday basis. We've got a serious, serious prison crisis going on. We've got some police brutality going on. Obviously, not all police departments, and there's a few that are making it bad for all of us. But we've got a number of issues that are affecting people every single day. And if you continue to make people feel like they don't matter and that their voice is not heard, then what's happening is we keep creating this cycle where there's disengagement. And we also keep seeing a bill of goods sold to us. Oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And then you don't come through for us. And then you're sitting around, well, why didn't they didn't come out and vote and they didn't support? Well, because you came at the last minute and pranced through the churches and said you was going to do X, Y, and Z, but you didn't do that. And so it is time to make sure that you get people in there who've been in the community, who've been living the life. I can't make it up. We've been doing this work consistently without any accolades and without any fanfare, simply because it's the right darn thing to do. And so those are the people that have to be in this position and to hold these positions of power in order for America to not lose sight of what she's there for.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Mrs. Clark. Representative Matthews, bring us home.
Yes, so I will bring us home by putting it where the goats can get it, as they say. How does politics affect our everyday lives? Y'all, we are here to help you through the red tape. So every time you have an issue in your life or something, a conundrum, right, a problem, we don't have to get the secretary. We don't have to stay on the line and wait on hold. I have a direct link that I can call and talk to somebody about helping you unravel your problem, whether it's education, whether it's infrastructure. Who owns this road? Why is it not fixed? Where is it on the priority list? People just want to know what's going on, and they can digest the information a lot better when they're not in the dark. That is what our job is. That is what we're here for. You get a lot of high level words, infrastructure, education, but y'all, we're here to get into the details. So when you're applying for unemployment and it doesn't work right, you can call us and we can call the top and get that figured out for everybody down the line. When you talk about politics, people get gone sometimes because they feel like it's over their head and they don't understand it. But y'all, I'm talking about, I go on flood walks when it's raining outside. I put on my rain boots and I go and I try to see where the water is building up, and I make the state and the city come at the same time. That way they can't argue about whose road it is. It's one of y'all's, and y'all need to figure it out now. That is what we're here for. So when you talk about everyday life in politics, remember that legislation is only one part of what we do. Legislation is not all of what we do. All of your solutions will not come through a bill. All of your solutions will not come through an act. Some of your solutions should come from making calls to the office of the person representing you and being able to get them to work through the red tape faster than you can to help resolve your issues and fix future systems so that they work for all of the people, all of the time, and not some of the people, some of the time.
Okay.
I'm in there, but that is where the goats can get it, y'all.
Oh, love it, love it, love it. Well, Mr.
Krystle takes us
Alexander.
to church.
Yes, well, I expected that from these three candidates tonight, y'all. Look, what a fabulous night, right? Mr. Alexander, Ms. Clark, Representative Matthews, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what to do. Make sure you take your social media handles, share it, share it, share it. Make sure you donate. Make sure you spread the word. And most importantly, take yourself and 10 other people. Make sure they get to the polls. We got to make this happen. These midterms, it's about us. We dictate what happens. I'm going to pass it over to my sisters, Lori and Jamie, to close us out.
Y'all fired up and ready to go?
Woo!
I am. And last note, Kansas has a huge constitutional amendment on the ballot tomorrow. If anybody has time, volunteer for a little GOTV in Kansas, do it. So.
Good. All right. We will see y'all in a couple of weeks with our next briefing. Thank you so much. This has been an amazing broadcast, and I know that it got lots of views on Facebook, and we'll post it to YouTube as well tomorrow. So it'll be up and circulated. Thank you all so much for being here, and you guys have a great night.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Good night. Thank you all.